Over the past year or two, our country has faced unusual challenges. Continuing pandemic concerns, the worrisome shifting of political winds, and other trials such as floods, fires, and most recently, horrifying tornadoes. Many fellow believers also struggle with financial worries and other concerns. Still, during this special season, our families and church congregations joyfully gather to sing hymns and carols, light candles, listen to children's choirs, and worship the Christ child who came and lived among us, and who continues to bless us with his presence. Unfortunately, however, beyond our borders, the Christmas story is not so welcome as it is here. In much of the world, the gathering of Christians for any reason is often far from safe. So writes my colleague, Lela Gilbert, in a new FRC blog. She is FRC's Senior Fellow for International Religious Freedom. Lela, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you very much, Joseph. I'm glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. You write in that blog that I just read an excerpt from a story about a woman named Mary Muhammadi, an Iranian convert to Islam from Christianity, who was jailed and physically abused for her faith. Her story represents the story of many. Tell us a little bit about what you wrote.
I wrote about Mary because I've been fortunate in being able to be in touch with her. I've never met her physically because, of course, she hasn't been able to leave Iran, and she's been jailed at least twice and badly treated. But I'm able to correspond with her privately, and so I could get her comments about Christmas just speaking to her. And as she said, and as I wrote in the article, it's not much of a celebration in Iran because although everyone celebrates the birth of Jesus in their hearts and whenever they can gather, there are continuous assaults on house churches and on individuals who are known to be Christians or Christian leaders. So it's a very dangerous time in Iran and not a time of great fun and joy and fellowship like we have here.
How many Christians around the world are in a situation like that where they cannot openly celebrate Christmas?
Well, there are hundreds of thousands, if not into the millions. The number I have here on one article, it's just something like 340 million Christians are in persecuted lands. That doesn't mean every single person can't celebrate Christmas.
Sure. But
compared to us and the freedoms we have and continue to have, most of the world is under tremendous pressure at this time of year. Christian people wanting to gather, celebrating, but we've had some terrible bombings and so forth over the years, as well as just these smaller church assaults. Yeah. And of course, as I wrote also, and you probably saw about Nigeria, which is just a continuing bloodbath.
Right. And I do want to get into that, but I hope the awareness of how many Christians live in places where they cannot openly celebrate, first makes us grateful, second, inspires in us a vigilance to preserve what we have, recognizing how unique and special it is, but also to generate sympathy and empathy and concern for those around the world who don't celebrate and don't enjoy what we still enjoy in America. In your view, you mentioned Nigeria. What are the countries that are particularly problematic when it comes to religious freedom?
Well, the ones that I wrote about Iran, I wrote about Nigeria, and Afghanistan, to our surprise, had a much larger Christian community than anyone knew until all of the uproar happened after Biden pulled America out of there. We found there were 10 to 12,000 underground Christians, entirely underground Christians. They're all converts from Islam. But beyond that, China is cracking down tremendously on Christians. North Korea has been the worst persecutor in the world for 20 years or more. It's just a nightmare, unbelievable there. In Myanmar, the Christians are being attacked during this civil war that's been going on there for quite some time. You can just about look anywhere in the world, Pakistan, even in places you wouldn't expect, like even in Finland now, there is control over what people can say. It's speech issues, and speaking what the Bible says about certain things can get you jailed, and it has happened to one woman. So, we have a tremendously blessed Christian life in the United States. And it's easy to find problems, but we need to be grateful. And we do have a responsibility to pray for our brothers and sisters abroad. It's a biblical injunction for us to do that.
Lela, do you think the international community is doing enough to acknowledge and address the threats to international religious freedom around the world?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's pathetic. And there are groups, of course, there are Christian groups and others that are human rights oriented that are aware of this and trying to do something. But our own country has backed off tremendously on this issue. Just during this new administration, we for example, lost the country of particular concern designation for Nigeria just a few weeks ago because this administration never explained why. But that took away the option of certain kinds of sanctions and other tactics that might have alerted the Nigerian government that they had a problem with us. But most of the world is doing nothing. The UN does very little. They're very concerned about Islamophobia, but they're not at all concerned about Christian persecution.
Lela, to that point, and we just have about a minute left, presidential administrations disagree about a lot of things, but generally, Democrats and Republicans would agree that people should not be imprisoned or beaten because of their faith. But how big of an impact does a change in a presidential administration make when it comes to the attention the U.S. government gives to this issue?
Well, it changes the amount of attention the government gives for sure. We still have allies in Congress that care about these things. But it also gives the license to some of these countries because they know that nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to be said. And so it just leaves an open door for terrible things to happen to our brothers and sisters around the world. And we really need to pray and we need to write to our congressmen and let them know what we think, because we do run the country, even though it doesn't look that way sometimes.
We do need to remember that we are very much involved in this process, and more than anything, or as much as anything on this issue, we need to pray. And Lela, thank you for your time today and reminding us of the importance of all that we have and the importance of keeping our brothers and sisters around the world in prayer. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Joseph.